everyone, and welcome to another episode of Washed Ashore. I'm once again joined by Sean, Vicky, and Max. Hi, guys.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
How are you doing this week?
Yeah, all good. All good, yeah. Nice weather at the moment, so I don't know how it goes for you guys, but yeah.
Yes, pretty
Doing
good.
well.
All
Actually.
good.
It's
Bit
nice.
windy, bit windy.
Oh, there's always one that's complaining, isn't there?
No, I mean it's fine. It's nice that it's not boiling hot, I think. But yeah, a bit windy.
Bit windy. Okay, great. So for this episode, we are going to be talking about maritime games. So board games, video games, games played on ships. And this ties into our theme for July, which is sport. So we're exploring the kind of world of maritime and sport, ships being used to take teams to international tournaments. We've got a webinar at the end of the month with Sean about shipbuilding and football and the relationship between the two. We're just going to have a great time playing sports and games. Who doesn't love sports and games, eh, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love them.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. So we're going to start by looking at games that would have been played on ships. So Max, I think you've been doing a bit of research into this. What would they have been playing on ships?
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, I suppose it would have been a lot of things that were sort of that required things that were commonly available. One of the really common games that you get are funnily enough, this is actually odd enough one that I think actually starts to emerge in about the sort of passenger ship era of the steamship, which is a game called Are You There, Kelly? And it's a bit. I've seen pictures of it, and it looks a bit primitive. But basically, you draw a chalk circle on the deck. Two men basically are then blindfolded and then lie face down on the deck within this circle. And the idea, I believe, is that they have to basically sort of hold hands in like a kind of an arm wrestling type stance, and the other free hand they've got basically a big wooden stick, and basically they just have to repeatedly just hit each other until one of them just lets go. It's an odd game. I don't know if it's popular anymore, but it was.
I think we should bring it back, guys.
I don't know. Are You There, Kelly?
Are You There, Kelly?
Yeah.
All right.
Right for the Olympics.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's good because you only need a bit of chalk, a blindfold, and a couple of massive sticks. So it's in terms of it is a game for the whole family.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
slightly now concerned about spending any more time with my boyfriend's family, as they are all Kellys. And they've not yet introduced this game to me, but
Yeah,
Possibly.
it's an odd one. It is an odd one. There are some really great pictures actually of it, but it seems to have been a really massive, almost like a kind of a spectator type deck game as well. But yeah, they sort of seem to have held tournaments and things like that. But yeah, it's a really weird game. I don't quite know exactly how it came about. It doesn't seem to have an origin story as such. It just sort of appears, particularly in the kind of Victorian period with the emergence of passenger ships and kind of the well-to-do going off and exploring and things like that. But yeah, it was an odd game to find. There is also another one again, which kind of it seems to me an awful lot like I guess a sort of a predecessor of kind of shuffleboard, but it's a game called Bullboard, and basically. It's basically like a large flat board about the size of a sort of a kitchen table, and it's covered with black canvas that's really stretched tight over it, and then it's got some white lines that are painted right at the very end, dividing it up into about 12 squares at one end, and basically players basically have basically flat pieces of lead that are covered with leather, and they throw them on the board standing at a distance. It's almost like a kind of a toss-up between curling shuffleboard and sort of bowls, basically. But you've got to basically sort of, the score's reckoned according to which square you get your you're led into. So again, another fairly simple game, but one that I think it also sort of seems to have kind of developed also into shuffleboard as well, somewhere along the line again. A little bit further back as well, you get obviously one of the big things on board, particularly in the Royal Navy and in the Age of Sail, is gambling. So you have loads and loads and loads of these often strange and quite sort of bizarre games that were developed purely for the purposes of gambling. So one of the more to bring the tone down slightly, if it could, from Are You There, Kelly? But to bring it down slightly even more, there was a game whereby, amongst other things like, lice racing, mealworm racing, things like that, which all sound pretty fascinating. There was another one, again, basically, where a man was then blindfolded, and then his hands were tied behind his back. He would then be sort of essentially in a sort of a small kind of arena, but usually below decks because this wasn't allowed. And rats would then be captured and then put in with him. And he would it would be essentially a bet on how many rats he could kill without his hands. Basically, but that so it's one that again was quite heavily prosecuted. Anybody, it's obviously really grotesque, but it's also in Hornblower as well, the TV show as well, which I was just about to say it is there, but it was a really popular game amongst very 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 bored sailors who were also obviously looking to make money as well. So gambling is a really massive one. In the same vein as gambling, you also have this game called Crown and Anchor, which is basically a game played. It's basically a dice game, and it's basically played between a player and a banker. And it was sort of developed in the 18th century. It was really popular in the Royal Navy, and then it's also became very popular in the sort of merchant and fishing fleets. Basically, the dice are the same. They're equal to standard dice, but the symbols on each are a heart, a crown, a diamond, a spade, an anchor, and a club. And basically, you make bets on which symbols come up. But it was a really contentious game, and it caused lots and lots of fights. It was banned in many places. The rules governing it are quite strict as well, so it's still very, very, very popular funnily enough, the Channel Islands and Bermuda. Because it had this really big connotation with organised crime and with gambling syndicates and things like that. It was so heavily regulated that it's only really allowed to be played on special occasions in Bermuda. So they play it at the annual Cricket Cup sort of match game in Bermuda, and in the Channel Islands they also play it at virtual, kind of agricultural shows and things like that. But yeah, it had this huge sort of enormous following among sailors, it was gained this really quite sort of dodgy, I guess kind of dodgy reputation really as being something that was played around the docks and things like that, and sailors would go and squander all their wages playing it. But so it's a strange. It's a lot of gambling ones.
Well, I think anything to pass the time, and gambling was always made everything a bit more interesting, didn't it? And pass the time on the long voyage. I think essentially.
Definitely, yeah. Simple games. Simple
games. Yeah, just get a stick and some chalk, and you're well away.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how most sports started. If you think of cricket and baseball and all of the others, it's just there's a stick, there's a ball, and off you go. Way of a time.
Well, I had no idea that obviously I was me and my brothers were obviously playing a version of Are You There, Kelly, without even knowing it. So just whacking each other with sticks. Yeah, I think that's what you do for a certain part of your childhood, isn't it? You just whack each other. Yeah. So there you go. I suppose that's where it comes from.
Yeah, there you go. You didn't know that you were playing a historical game.
Nice.
Great. So thanks for that, Max. Looking at games played on ships. So now we're going to move on to games played off ships, but using ships. And we're starting with board games. So I think possibly the most famous board game that involves ships is Battleships. I'm guessing every one of you has played Battleships at some point in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Christmas.
Great, yeah. Always at
Christmas, yeah,
Christmas.
yeah.
You used to get those travel size ones that you could take on the plane.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, I remember
I
those.
had one of those. But you could also, even without having the kind of setup, you could just create a grid yourself if you felt like it, if you were that bored.
Yeah.
So its origins are from the First World War, and initially it did start as a pad and pencil game and a strategic game. And for those of you listening who may not have played it, essentially it's 2 players. Each player marks on their pad, as it was, a fleet of ships in various different positions. The opposing player does the same, and then you each have to try and sink the other's fleet. Very simple. You guess the coordinates, and then you end up saying, yeah, hit, miss, or you sunk my battleship. All of those sorts of things. And then in 1967, it was released as a plastic board game by Milton Bradley, and it has been turned into apps, video games, all sorts of things. So why do we think the game Battleships is still popular? Because I think I've seen it on like the the app stores that you can get a downloadable version, and people like to play it on the train and that sort of thing. So why do we think Battleships is still played by people?
I think it's definitely something to do with accessibility. I mean, in terms of physically, but also in terms of the actual like method of the game. I think anyone can play it. I think you can get a 10-year-old kid to play it, and like someone in their 90s to play it.
Yeah.
It's universal. I mean, I haven't played it in. I'd say about 10 years, but I reckon if we had one of those little travel packs in the office, I reckon, we'd all be able to just pick it up and get going again. And I would most certainly lose. Yeah.
Yes, I remember playing it once when I was in the cadets, and we used it as a method of how to use radio correctly and radio etiquette. So we were like 2 teams positioned way across the sort of the cadet base. And we were just sort of radioing to the other one saying, hello, Bob, this is Charlotte, E3 over. And then they go back saying, that was a hit. And we spent all night playing Battleships via radio. And
I don't get the enjoyment of the game. Like, there's nothing, I kind of want a game where, something happened. I just feel as though like, oh yeah, you hit my battleship. It just feels a bit lackluster.
You've waited until like 10 minutes into the greatest sort of like chat about battleships to then just completely destroy it.
Yeah.
Oh. How dare you? It's one of the greatest maritime games in history.
Yeah.
It was not for me. You see, I'm gonna throw a pop-up pirate into the mix because that, the pirate pops up.
Was that the one that was like a version of Buckaroo with a pirate?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You had a barrel and like little plastic swords, and you had to get the plastic swords into the barrel without the pirate popping up. Now, I had this as a child, and then I managed to find. They still produced it, so I was able to get it for my nieces as well. And I think that's nice. It's going down the generations now. Pop-up pirate.
When you say you got it for your nieces, Vicky,
I kind of got it for me as well. We spent a lot of time playing pop-up pirate together. Well, there's 4 players, so you might as well, hadn't you? It's great fun.
It was a great game. I think what Vicky wants from board games is the anticipation that something's going to happen that's going to possibly scare her.
Well, yeah, 'cause the second best game is Buckaroo because of the how much can you get on it before it books?
Yeah.
Is it quite a tenuous link if we talk about Monopoly and the battleship that you can choose as your little like?
No, that's go for it.
Complete marker.
I think it works.
Oh, many a family Christmas has been ruined by Monopoly, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Was anyone always the battleship? Was that your go-to one?
I used to like that, yeah. That or the car.
Yeah.
I used to be the car or the hat. I liked the hat.
I used to go for the hat as well, actually. Yeah.
I always went for the dog or the battleship.
I always used to think there were ones that there were always those ones that nobody wanted, like the iron. I don't think I've ever met anyone that wanted. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've ever met anyone who wanted to be the iron.
Was there a thimble as well? Have I made that up in my head?
There was,
wasn't there? Yeah.
Yeah.
There was. We've got a more like recent version where you've got it's almost like a credit card machine and Visa cards. With Visa on them, and you kind of have to, so you don't use the actual cash anymore, you have this like Visa card. And they've updated all of you've still got the race car and the Scotty dog, but now you've got things like rollerblades and skateboards and I think there's an aeroplane and stuff, like they've tried to kind of bring Monopoly into the 21st century, so I don't think there's a thimble and an iron anymore. You don't have that option.
It's just I don't know if I could play a game of Monopoly without a thimble in it or an iron. Just
But part of the Monopoly experience is when the banker has to organise all of the cash that's come loose in the box. So this credit card machine has just absolutely ruined that aspect of the game.
Yeah.
Well, you have to make sure that all of the I think you start with like £15 million. So you have to, that's what? Yeah, but they've updated the prices of everything. So they've got rid of some of like the traditional London streets that feature in Monopoly, and they've got new ones in there now. So like St Catherine's Docks in Wapping is on there. And a couple of other like new ones that they've added. I think they've got rid of Brick Lane and things like that. So they've totally like overhauled the whole game. But I think there's something about, like Sean said, it's something about organising all of the paper money, isn't it, before you start playing?
I mean, my two favourite versions of Monopoly are the Arsenal Monopoly game and the Essex one. So.
We had a whole one as well. They released a whole one.
How good would it be if they had like a Monopoly game for like shipbuilders around the world? That's something we should get in touch with them and see if we've got the records.
I think that's a niche. Yeah.
That's not a bad idea, Sean. I like it.
Let's get in on that. Anyway,
and then you could have, instead of irons, you could have like shipbuilding tools. You could have like rivets and little welding.
So you're going to have to think of the pieces that people really want, and then the ones that people will go, I don't. No one plays with that.
No one wants an anchor.
Yeah, I don't want to be a rivet again.
Yeah. Oh well, I think that took a bit of a detour, so looking at other board games that have kind of maritime-y links, they tend to be more sort of strategic. I mean, maybe apart from Pop-Up Pirate, these ones seem to be...
The strategy in Pop-Up Pirate, I will not have it said that there isn't. There definitely is.
But I stumbled across two that I've played, one that I haven't, but I kind of now want to. But Ticket to Ride, Rails and Sails, Of the North Sea, and Endeavour Age of Sail. So they're sort of three strategic-based games that, explore various aspects of maritime and ships. So I don't know if anyone's played Ticket to Ride before, but essentially it was originally train tickets, and you had to get all over the world, taking various routes and via trains. And then in 2016 they released Ticket to Ride, Rails and Sails, so you had to use trains and ships, which is it's quite cool because it's it's sort of strategic, but it's also looking at the idea of exploration and travel and kind of mapping out those sorts of routes. Of the North Sea was set in the Viking Age, and there are three board games, and you either build your fleet, invade, or explore. And then Endeavour Age of Sail, you are sort of building your empire based in Europe or the Mediterranean. So, guys, why do you think people would be playing sort of board games that are sort of maritime strategic board games? And why do you think these sort of areas were picked? Sort of exploration, Vikings, empire building, those sorts of things.
Well, I think that, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I think the whole point of gaming, if it's, if it's like a PlayStation, even something like Monopoly, is to have that other aspect or perspective and of world building. So I think that most people aren't explorers in their day-to-day job. Most people aren't pirates in their day-to-day job, but I think it allows that sort of you can transcend what you're doing in life through technology and through gaming, whether it is on a board game or if it's on like a PlayStation game, for example. So I think that element is, I think that's throughout this chat, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I would go with that. I think, I think a lot of these games, they try and channel into something that's, that's adventure based, and it's a nice form of escapism, really. But no, they're interesting. They're all good. It's all good stuff.
It's the films we were talking about, isn't it? It's that kind of, like Sean said, you can't be a pirate in everyday life, but you can play a game or watch a film about them. It's kind of that escapism that's really important to people, isn't it? And I guess it's quite fun as well, like playing a game where you've got to build an empire and sail across oceans, and there's something quite interesting about doing that.
I think this is going to get quite in depth. I think the other thing that's quite interesting about it is like the level at which some like that escapism is present, because we'll probably talk about like Ship Simulator, which is quite sort of to the point. You're on a ship, pilot it. Where something like well, we were speaking about in a minute, I think Assassin's Creed Black Flag, that's so much more sensationalized and sort of the entertainment aspect rather than the technical aspect of piloting a ship. So.
Yeah, I think obviously at the moment, escapism is quite important.
Welcome.
I think through various means. So yeah, we've sort of spoken very briefly about video games in that chat, and I think video games obviously have become so much more important and popular and everything over recent years, and you can play as all sorts of characters, from cowboys to a goat to a slice of bread to a soldier to a footballer.
Where do you play a slice? Where are you a slice of bread?
There's a game on the on PlayStation 4 where you're a slice of bread and you just sort of flop about the kitchen.
Huh.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's escapism to a whole other level.
I mean, this is completely, it has nothing to do with the conversation whatever with regards to Maritime Games, but there used to be a game on Xbox Live called No Luca No, and it was an independent game from an independent game studio, and the premise of the game was that you needed to stop the cat from eating a bowl of cereal. And the game mechanic was when the cat would come into frame, you would push your hand in between the cat and the cereal and push it away. I'm not making this up.
Did you play this game?
No, it went viral when it first came out because I think everyone started like doing let's plays of it and was like, surely this can't be it, and they actually played it, and then which is like, this is the greatest / worst game in history. So, no Luca No if you fancy some sort of weird experience.
excellent.
Something for everyone, isn't there?
It really is.
So I think as we can see, these games offer some form of escapism, and pirate-based video games have been popular for a very, very long time. So I've just picked a couple. Of course, well, my favourite pirate game, I think, and one of the more famous ones is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Now, Vicky, I know you're a big fan of the Assassin's Creed series, as are, I think, a few others of us as well. Can you give us a bit of a background about Assassin's Creed? What is the series and what's it all about?
Yeah, I think it combines my personal joy from it comes from the fact that it combines playing video games with history, which is like great, isn't it? For full-on history geeks. So you've got. I think what's enjoyable is it's kind of a bit like the video game equivalent of Blackadder to me. The fact that there's so many periods in history that they can use. So you've got the first one is set in the the Crusades, and then you move on to the second one with Ezio in Italy, which is just, I think, one of the best ones. And then you're in the American Civil War, and I think it sort of trails off a bit. And then you get Black Flag, which is set in you're a privateer turned pirate, and you interact with kind of the famous pirates like Blackbeard, and you swashbuckle around the Caribbean, assassinating people and sailing your ship. It's just a great game, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I've not met anyone that's not liked it, if I'm honest. I mean, not that it's the first subject of conversation that I bring up with people, but
it should be.
I've never heard anyone say that they didn't enjoy it. I think it's just a brilliant game.
Yeah, I think with video games set on ships, maritime, pirates, naval, whatever it is, the creation of battles on ships was always difficult. You tended to just get on a ship and sail it somewhere, and sometimes you weren't even allowed to sail it. You just get on it and then cut scene, and then you were suddenly on the other island. I just missed the epic sailing. But the battle element, I think, has always been difficult. So sort of along the lines of Assassin's Creed, you also of course have the games Pirates of the Caribbean, based on the films, and I think there was one, Sean, I think this is one that you've mentioned, where specifically about ship battles.
Yeah, so I remember, I think this was about 15 or so years ago, when I used to have a PlayStation Portable, which I don't know if anyone had one of those, but it was a really good mobile games console. But the Pirates of the Caribbean Disney franchise released a game to go along with the sequel film, Dead Man's Chest, I think it was. And the actual game itself pretty much followed the film, and you could go to Tortuga and do the swashbuckling stuff with Jack Sparrow. But the interesting, I'd never experienced this before this, but they actually had a very small multiplayer portal where you could do ships battles with friends. Now, at this point, I don't think I had Wi-Fi. I didn't know how to set it up, so I was basically doing single player against AI sort of pirates. But at the start screen, you could choose I think it was about 10 or so different ship types. So sloops, galleon. You could even choose Black Pearl as well, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah.
I actually, so before we got into this podcast last night, I actually YouTubed the game, and there was one obscure video of this multiplayer feature. And I think it's entirely in Spanish. But the visuals, obviously, they're the same, and I had a real nostalgia moment. I was like, oh, I remember that. So, yeah, I might have to have a look on eBay for the PSP version of Dead Man's Chest, but also a PSP itself. So,
yeah,
who knows? I'll keep you all posted.
Yeah. Sean's going down memory lane.
So, yeah, I probably should have said the premise of the ship battles as well was actually sort of, the idea was you'd plunder people's cargo, or you'd get ship enhancements from defeating your sort of adversary, so to speak. Yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah, well, I like the Pirates of the Caribbean games anyway, and I think that sort of in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, that element of the battles with the ships and the kind of plundering and pillaging and all of that seemed to work really well, and seemed to kind of move those sorts of games forward. I quite enjoyed that. I actually liked being in control of the ship, and kind of strategically going about the islands, and fighting people that I came across.
You see that a lot more in the later ones as well, don't you? Like the Greek Odyssey one, you're kind of travelling around on ships, and presumably in the new Viking one, there's going to be a fair amount of travelling around pillaging things on ships. That will be cool as well.
I played all the Assassin's Creeds up to Assassin's Creed 3, the one that was with the sort of the sort of American War of Independence, and then yes, I've not played Black Flag.
Oh, Max,
I know.
Get all of them, because even the not as good ones are still brilliant.
Yeah, like all the earlier ones I played, but I that one kind of, I don't know, that one lost me slightly. I don't think
it was
a bit of a dip.
It wasn't great. I think what's good now is like as well they've got this kind of explore mode where you can sort of go and look at various different, historical sites and learn about. So it's kind of, you can argue it's a bit educational as well if you really want to reach for a reason to buy it. But yeah, I remember there was a documentary on the TV when the Syndicate came out, the one set in London. And it was fascinating the effort that actually goes into creating these games, and the way that they were researching old maps of London, and they had I think they had like some kind of bird of prey that was flying around with a camera attached to its head, so that they could get that bird's eye view of everything. And you just think like, I don't think we always appreciate that with games, do we? It's like we just want to smash through and finish it, but the actual effort that goes into creating something is really, and the kind of nod to the historical accuracy is really cool as well, I think, with those games.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, with these sorts of historical ship-based games, now obviously you with them you're playing as fictional characters, but in some of them you meet real historical figures. So in Black Flag, I think you meet Blackbeard, and you meet Charles Vane, Mary Read, and Bonny, all sorts of other famous pirates. But do you think historical accuracy is important in these video games, or does it not matter at all, or is it nice to have a bit of a balance?
I don't think it matters with a game.
No.
Like, again, like the Syndicate one where you were getting given missions by Karl Marx, it felt like you were just being bothered by Karl Marx all the time, or Charles Darwin. And I don't suppose that they were that irritating in real life. But it just doesn't see. Again, it's that, like we spoke about with the films and stuff. It's, if you want something accurate, then a game or a film probably isn't the best place to get that accuracy. I think that there's got to be a bit of elaboration in order to make the game interesting. It's,
and I think again, like with the films, it just gives you a taste of that period or those characters, and the fact that they do use real life or historic people in the games again does give it that sense of kind of realism, but also it's a game, it's escapism. I do think the most accurate pirate based video game is Lego Pirates of the Caribbean, just going around as Lego characters building things. Which is a lot of fun. I'm a bit obsessed with the Lego franchise video game series.
The Lego franchise was excellent.
Yeah.
Especially the Lego Indiana Jones.
That was the best one.
Yeah,
absolutely
that was a good
one. Before we go off on a tangent, I think so moving away from pirates, sometimes in games ships are kind of used to create fear, dread, that kind of panic and horror sort of element, because again, I think we spoke about in the films podcast, sometimes being at sea has a real fear for people, and obviously there's been a lot of disasters at sea. So sometimes in kind of particularly in the war games, military games, if a ship is involved, it tends to be in a very bad situation. So I picked Medal of Honor Rising Sun as a game I really enjoyed when I was younger, but because it starts with Pearl Harbor, and of course it's in the game, I think immediately you're on the American naval ship, and you're woken up by the attack on Pearl Harbor. It becomes quite a sort of claustrophobic, fear-inducing, panic-inducing scene that you've got to play through. And I think sometimes in games they kind of use ships for that purpose. I don't know if there's any other games you can think of where you're kind of trapped on a ship, or you're sinking, or anything like that.
I think in a similar vein, I mean it was more recent than Rising Sun, which by the way was a great game. I completely agree with you. I think Battlefield 4, I think it was. Oh, Battlefield 4, I think, because there was I think there was in the campaign there was like one of the sort of aircraft carriers. You're basically trapped on board and have to sort of fight a number of different assailants. But the claustrophobia in there was definitely sort of present as well.
Mm.
Because I think for players that haven't, I mean, I've never been an aircraft carrier, but like just to see just sort of like the quarters now, the mess hall, and then like the lack of like natural light in some areas, and then just, chuck into that a bunch of hand grenades and small assault rifles. It's like, oh wow, this is scary.
It's a bit intense. So
why do you want to? Like, this is just out of interest. Like, why do you want to play games like that? Because it, like, that's never been anything that's like interested me like that kind of like real life war type thing. So what's the interest there? Like, why do you want to feel claustrophobic and terrified by something?
Well, I didn't, to be honest. I didn't know that was going to. I don't really know. I think, like I said, I think it's the experience element. It's doing something you haven't done before, but from the comfort of your own home. I think. I guess the element of like being a soldier and stuff like that. I think. I don't know really. I think.
It's one that's often debated, isn't it? The idea of playing war military games, because of course they're real events, and if it is, if you really are playing like Rising Sun, it's absolutely based on the attack on Pearl Harbor, which of course was horrifying for anyone involved. It is a really challenging kind of genre, but one that is incredibly popular. I don't really know. I really love sort of war military games. For me, I think it also goes back to that element of you're playing history, as we mentioned with Assassin's Creed. But I think it's definitely challenging, and I think one element of them that they don't do as much is that kind of maritime naval side of it. There's not been the Battlefield games are so popular, and one of them is set during the First World War. But there was no reference to the Battle of Jutland, for example. So it's definitely a challenging one. I think.
Yeah, definitely. I must admit, I remember playing Medal of Honor: Rising Sun like years and years ago. I actually don't. Yeah, that was it was an amazing game. But yeah, it was. I think it's that same thing, isn't it? Really, I guess it's the same thing that motivates people to watch like horror films and all that kind of stuff. I think it is in part. I think as Sean says, the experience of the thing, and also just I think just the sheer spectacle of it, and there is just that. It is quite an adrenaline fueled kind of thing. And I think it's just those themes are just quite kind of as emotive and I think controversial as they are. I think they are just really, really, really quite fascinating, and people are quite drawn to them. So I mean, it's in that sense, it's kind of not surprising that I think people are drawn to those kinds of games, because people are drawn to that kind of history, and all of the stories and the experiences and just generally the history behind all of that, I suppose.
Do you think there's a need for those kind of games to be more accurate? So like with a game that's set in Renaissance Italy, I don't feel the need for that like level of accuracy. Whereas do you think maybe if it's kind of like based on war and quite serious events, like do you think that there should be more accuracy in that kind of game?
I mean, it's tough to say. I can definitely see why people would think that, and why people are quite big proponents of making sure that those kinds of games, particularly ones that are about sort of modern history and big sort of traumatic world events, are more accurate and that they are representative of what happened. But I don't know. I mean, things like like Call of Duty and things like that, with sort of Nazi zombies and things like that. I mean, it's kind of, I think there's got to be, on some level, a kind of an expectation that you are playing a game, and it isn't history. In the same way, you could read like historic fiction or anything like that. It's sure there's going to be a level of historical accuracy, but I think you've also got to allow for a degree of creativity, and ultimately, it isn't history. It is entertainment, and it is something that's a sort of a leisure activity, really.
Yeah, it is an odd one because some part of me does think, why, in my free time do I want to sit down and play a war game? And like with Battlefield, in the First World War, they did use or had the names of real people who died
Mm.
and the kind of dates and things. So then it becomes a little bit more realistic in that
Mm.
sense. But then on the other side, you play as Lawrence of Arabia, and the mission you have to do is probably not exactly quite what he did, and the way things are done. So, and obviously you have that classic, you're one person, and even if you are part of a unit, they never do anything to help you. You're the one that's got to go through and kill everyone
Mm.
yourself and win, and essentially it feels like win the whole war. They seem to, it's not sort of accurate like that. It's difficult. On that
Mm.
note, do we think there are any maritime stories, events, naval or military in the kind of wider sense, that would be inappropriate for video games? So I'm thinking things like the Titanic or other sorts of events like that. Because apparently there is a Titanic video game coming out in a couple of years.
Okay.
Oh, do you know, I vaguely remember, and Sean might be able to jump in and help me because I think we looked at it together, but there was some kind of thing where we looked at this a few years ago maybe, and I think it was a video game where you would, I don't know what happened to it, I think it was maybe one of those that was like a Kickstarter type thing, but you wandered around Southampton to various different like buildings, and I'm sure it had something to do with the Titanic.
I mean, I know we looked at a game. I think what I'm thinking of is different, but I know we looked at a game whereby um, this game company completely like digitally mapped the Titanic, and in real time did her sinking. But I don't think there was any passengers on board, so it was just the structure of the vessel, and it was the different saloon rooms and quarters.
So
Did
But
you wander around Southampton as well?
I don't.
I, I need
the
to
one I'm
Google this,
thinking
don't I?
of, the one I'm thinking of is called Titanic, Honor and Glory, and I believe it's coming out next year or the year after. But you play as an American Oxford graduate who's going back across to America on the Titanic, but he has to clear his name as he's been accused of something. So he has to investigate, and then the Titanic hits the.
I've just Googled, this is it. I've just Googled it. This has
Okay.
been in production for a really, really long time, hasn't it?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and I think they're finally doing it. But do we think it is? Would you feel comfortable playing a game like this where we know it was a disaster and thousands lost their lives and other sort of maritime disasters like that? Or should it just be more, as sort of Sean said, the simulated experience of the ship and what actually happened? This is what happened and this is how it sank, so it's more educational.
It's not really, it doesn't feel about, if you're being an Oxford graduate who's like been accused of murder, and it feels more like a detective game that just happens to be set on a ship. Like,
Yeah.
Is it, you're not playing a game as a captain of a ship that is going to sink. It's kind of very different to, because that aspect of like, oh, you've been framed for murder and you've got to prove that you're innocent. Like, that sounds quite fun to me.
Yeah.
And the Titanic aspect of it seems like it's just coincidental more than anything.
Could be any
Yeah,
ship.
you could be on any ship. You could be on in any city in that respect.
So do you think it's a good way of telling that such a story, but with a sort of fictional element? So you're more interested in the investigation or the character rather than, you're not the officers who's or even the the White Star Line owners going, oh, that's enough lifeboats, that's fine, and kind of orchestrating it like that. You're just a character that's doing something else, and then just so happens to be on the Titanic.
I think that there's always got to be some element of like non-realism, whether it is in sort of like the game, like the actual like game mechanics, or in like the plot. But I do think there's definitely the historical accuracies needs to be present, but also I think for like the Titanic, for instance, like in this game, I mean, I don't think they would, but you'd hope that they'd sort of, do due diligence to what happened with the tragedy, but also maybe even look at things like SOLAS and how that impacted further maritime safety. So it's not just, I mean, it might be dry for some, but like if there was another game doing something about the Titanic and it was, focusing on her wreck, her sinking, then it would be interesting to see how they'd manage that. Because, it was a terrible tragedy and it was, awful, but it did bring, positive legislation and save more lives because of it. Unfortunately, that's the sort of the nuts and bolts of it. So yeah, I think if you are going to sort of do realism, it has to be in good taste.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think these sorts of historical events, you can put them into games in various ways, educational purposes, whatever they are. Some I think should still be off limits, and you probably don't play certain historical events. But for the most part, as long as there's sort of a respect to what happened and to the people, it seems to be sort of an interesting one to explore. So moving away from war and maritime disaster, there are games where you can simply pretend to be ships, for those that are interested in doing that sort of thing. So the two we've got listed here are Full Steam Ahead and Ship Simulator. So who wants to talk through what they are, what you do in them?
So, I mean, Full Steam Ahead, I mean, this is kind of a little trivial game, but I think we've sort of spoken about it before in the office. But it's developed by the SS Great Britain, and it's a flash game and also, I think, now an app. It's like the old sort of mini-clip games you used to be able to play in browser. I don't know if anyone ever played those back in the day. But you could design your own ship, and you had to navigate the sea safely. And it had things like, if you had more cargo, you'd have to change the specifications, and then obviously, you had to change the engine. Do you have sails? Do you have steam? And it was really good. I think it was sort of catered to younger audiences, but I remember playing it as an adult and thought, this is great.
You're truly passionate about ships, aren't you, Sean?
This is brilliant. It was like the art style was good as well, but that's personal preference.
And I suppose with the ship simulator game, I think there's been a few of them, and there's probably others out there as well. But you pick your ship, so a container ship. But you can also be Titanic in this one, and there's various ports, and you sort of navigate in and out of them, complete certain missions. Apparently, this one was praised for its educational value, and it's interesting. And I think where these sort of ship simulators kind of come in, I suppose it is kind of, I don't know if it's relaxing or kind of escapism as well, that you are just kind of sailing a ship around, going into port, going off again, and that. I always used to sort of use plane simulators rather than ship simulators, I have to admit. But yeah, I think, has anyone ever played any of these or are interested in any of them?
I've been on an actual ship simulator, like a 360 one. The foundation funded the Warsash, some of the training things at Warsash Maritime Academy. So we got to go and visit them. And that was, I mean, to be honest, like it's a brilliant piece of equipment for the apprentices to kind of learn how to. You could pick various different ports that you were coming into, and you obviously had loads of stuff going on. I chose Sydney and decided that I just wanted to ram into the back of one of the naval ships that was docked. So I don't think I was using it for the kind of full capacity of it. But they did have to warn us that if you got seasick, it might be a bit much for you. And there were a couple of people that didn't enjoy this, because like I say, it's a 360 simulator, so you're on the bridge and you do get that kind of movement. But yeah, it was that was good fun actually. I'd do that again. It was fun. Maybe not maybe not crash on purpose, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if they'd let you behind an actual ship now, Vicky, if you're just all crash into that.
Yeah, if the sailing days are anything to go by, it's probably for the best.
I must admit, I've always wanted to try one of those sort of official 360 simulators. I just always think they look amazing. Like, was it like, what was it like? Was it really, like, how immersive was it?
Pretty immersive. I mean, this is, they use this to train the cadets. So it's quite accurate. And quite sort of immersive. You're coming into port and there's various different things going on, and you've got to pay attention to the kind of, the rules of the sea. And yeah, it's you've got all of that equipment there. It's I think as far as I've never been on the bridge of like a bulk carrier going into Sydney Harbour, but I would assume that with all of the equipment there, it's probably as accurate as you're going to get with something, rather than actually being on the bulk carrier. So yeah, it was interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
That is interesting.
So speaking of kind of virtual reality experiences, the Heritage and Education Centre team launched a virtual reality experience end of last year now? Last year?
So
lost all the time now.
Yeah, we're actually coming up to almost a year now. It shows up how much time's gone past. So for those that don't know, in August of last year, we launched Ship Surveyor Through the Ages, which was our first ever virtual reality experience. The premise of the experience was basically to put the player with a virtual reality headset and controllers on board 3 different ships throughout history. So it was a time trial experience, and the idea is you identify different survey issues on board, get some points, and you get added to a leaderboard at the end of the game. The game is actually freely available, I should say. It's actually available on Steam and also on Viveport. So if you do search Ship Surveyor Through the Ages, you'll find the Steam page and the Viveport page, as well as the YouTube trailer for the experience. But the 3 ships that are actually in the experience are a Dutch galliot vessel, a composite ship, and also a modern-day container ship. And the beauty with the development cycle for this was he actually works closely with Lloyd's Register Group's marine team. So a lot of their marine surveyors actually assisted in regards to the modern ships, saying, oh, well, this could potentially be an issue, and this crops up quite a bit. With the historical vessels as well, because of our archive, in particular our ship plan and survey report collection, the surveyor's remarks sections of survey reports proved a vital resource for developing this. So it's a perfect sort of example of using historical information from our archive, but also the current expertise of Lloyd's Register Group to actually develop the experience. So it's free to download, and yeah, I'll implore you all to download it if you have a VR headset and a functioning PC.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So before we went into lockdown, who in the heck team was at the top of our leaderboard?
I'm going to exclude myself with this because I still hold the record.
All right, show off.
I think Michael might actually. Yeah, I think Mike, because there's been a couple of times we've had to recalibrate the experience, but like I won't bore you to death, but basically you have to recalibrate the space for the experience so that people don't bump into things and this, that, and the other. But to test like the sort of movement, we did it very quickly, so as quickly as possible. And one of those test runs, I think he got a score of something like 80,000.
Wow.
And I think you can only get up to 90,000. So I think he probably does hold the record. Yeah.
Well, if anyone out there has downloaded it and has played it, let us know your score. Yeah. Beat it.
Yeah, do send a screenshot and send it through. That'd be really interesting.
So coming to the end of this episode, and one question I want to ask you guys, and we've kind of spoken about it a little bit throughout, is if you could create a maritime-based game, board game, video game, virtual reality game, or anything, what would it be? So we've obviously got Sean's Monopoly idea, which is great.
Yeah, I'm taking that one. Go straight to the Monopoly company and putting that right on the CEO's desk.
Yeah. So has anyone got any others that they would just love to play, if they could?
I mean, Are You There, Kelly? Is a pretty good one to try. But yeah, I don't know. I think I must admit, after this, it occurred to me that I've not played Battleships in probably like 15 years. So I think I'll probably have to dig out a copy, somewhere in the house somewhere. But yeah, I think in terms of games to that I'd like to see, I think. I don't know. I must admit, I'm probably not the best placed. I mean, I've not even played Black Flag, so I mean, I might have to about. Yeah, I think I've massive backlog to catch up on.
That's the answer. What's your dream game? Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Yeah. So, yeah.
There we go. So everyone go, and we all know that Vicky will just be playing Pop-Up Pirate. For the foreseeable future, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking I might have to put in some kind of order to get it delivered for tomorrow. I don't know if it'll be as much fun playing it by myself. It's really sad, isn't it? Just sit there playing away. Imagine if there's an electronic version, you can maybe play against like the AI players or something. That might be the way forward.
The VR Pop-Up Pirate.
Yeah. An actual pirate.
Just writing that down now.
Nice. Perfect.
Well, I think we've got some good ideas there, guys, that we can take forward. See if we can make our millions with some new maritime-based games. So thank you all for joining me again. It's been a pleasure talking to you about all sorts of maritime games.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you everyone for listening. As we've sort of said in our other podcast, these are just a handful of maritime games. So do send us your favourite maritime games or games you'd like to see. Comment on our social media pages. And we'll be back again for another episode soon. So thank you all again. Bye.
Bye-bye.